You're listening to The Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, and co-host, Keelan Harvey on Alternative Talk AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage experts, Tina Mitchell and Keelan Harvey.
You are listening to The Money Hour at 1150 AM KKNW, the Friday, October 8th virtual show. Because of COVID, our show is temporarily moved virtually. You can listen to us on podcast as well as on air on Saturday at 3 p.m. with a rebroadcast on Sunday at 8 a.m. I am your host, Tina Mitchell.
And I'm your co-host, Keelan Harvey.
We bring into studio each week the best of the best experts in our local market on everything regarding money and life. And we're here to help you in today's economy. And now in studio, Alina, Soto of Terra, Dusa. Trauma and mental health, it's not just all about you in your head. Right here on 1150 AM KKNW. Alina, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Hello.
Hello. And a little bit about Alina. Dr. Alina Soto is the founder and CEO of Terra Dusa PLLC, a holistic mental health provider with a unique and individualized approach towards helping clients heal trauma. They received their doctorate of neuropathic medicine, currently with a Master of Clinical Counseling Psychology from Bastyr University, and survived. Dr. Soto combines psychoeducation, cognitive behavioral therapy, neurothobic medicine, and physical medicine as therapy to address the multiple spheres that affect mental health. The goal is to facilitate a client's discovery of their own path and inner language. Specialties include trauma, PCSD, and PTSD, personality disorders, and grief.
Wow, Lena, what amazing work you're doing. Naturopathic is the key thing that got me there, because a lot of times it feels like drugs are just given out to people, as just like a quick fix. And naturopathic means that I'm assuming, fixing people at their core. And what harder to fix than oftentimes trauma. So why trauma as a specialty?
So quite honestly, I fell into it completely by accident. I was an LMP, so a licensed massage therapist for about 8 years. And one of the things I noticed as I was working on people is that their pain seemed to correlate with the intensity of the story they were just about to tell me after something released. Right. And so I realized that there was a real need for people carrying around really heavy stuff, really heavy stories to be seen and to be heard. And as I was essentially contemplating this during that time, one of the things I realized that there was a pretty big separation, at the time between what is considered, mental health sciences and what is considered physical or physiological sciences, right? They were kept a little separate, like either it was all in your head or something went wrong in the bod, right? And basically what I wanted to do, what I decided to do was to combine somehow those two sciences, right? Which is why I went into naturopathic medicine, because it seemed to be a school of thought that was the closest to combining everything. And then I took, clinical psych just to top it all off. And then I had body work underneath my belt. So I was able to essentially have the disciplines to address all of the spheres that connect mental health, whether it's cognitive, psychological, physical, physiological, social, environmental, or systemic. And Keenan, I think you had a good example of that when you were talking about your story, right? Mental health is not just about what's going on in here, but what you're able to do with your body, right? And so I felt like trauma was the area where I believe that there was the most need for a well-rounded approach.
And what an amazing gift you have as well, Alina. And as Stacey was talking about, your intuition and where that leads you, and sharing kind of the space that you were in and the passion behind needing to find a need and a solution and connect these together brought you where you're at. And that's exactly what Stacey was sharing with us today, is following that intuition. I would love for you to share with our listeners about your own personal approach to this.
Yes. So currently my approach has two prongs to it. So something called transdiagnostics and a second thing called psychoeducation. And essentially what transdiagnostics is within mental health, it's this idea that we can look at mental health conditions more as tendencies rather than just cut and dry boxes of symptoms. And this is because all of the symptomology that happens when we have mental health conditions, so such as depression or anxiety, for example, they are not outside of the human range of normal. So if you took someone who technically doesn't have anything wrong and they weren't eating very well one day, they didn't get much rest for like 3 days or something, and then they got into a car accident and then their spouse was like, we need a divorce. I bet you that that person is going to look like someone with a mental health condition, right? The response to that stress isn't necessarily abnormal, right? The persistent problems can cause problems down the line, but the initial reaction isn't necessarily. And so the other thing with transdiagnostics is that when we started taking the data with people who have mental health conditions, so started doing reviews and analyses, we discovered that people with comorbidities along with a mental health condition, so that just means that people had a bunch of other stuff going on than just like simply depression. If you had depression, you probably had anxiety, you probably had diabetes, you probably had chronic pain, you probably had a bunch of other stuff going on. So that tells us that that mental health is much more complex than just necessarily a brain chemical gone wrong, right? And the second prong to my approach is something called psychoeducation. So essentially what I do is I take the learning from my multiple disciplines and I make it digestible enough so my client or my patient can apply it to their life, right? And so I take a bunch of learnings from some of my favorite bodies of work, like Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the Body Keeps Score, The Neuroscience of Human Relationships by Lou Cozzolino, and also the concept of interpersonal neurobiology by Dan Siegel. And I take all of this, I actually literally create diagrams and little models for people to be able to apply knowledge that can be very, very effective and helpful at recognizing like what's going on inside of me and what's actually driving this.
What a neat approach. That's really cool. And I hear there might be an additional third prong that will be added.
Yes.
Is that the truth?
Yes, that is the truth. So my third prong, in the next coming months, I'm actually going to be pivoting my business to introduce a third thing, which is basically approaching the nervous system. So what we've been learning with trauma is that essentially the nervous system in the body kind of gets stuck essentially in the past, as if they're reliving what happened in the past over and over and over again in the present moment. So people feel continuously unsafe in the moment that they're in. And physical modalities can be super impactful in helping calming the nervous system. And physical modalities can be any of them. So like things such as exercise, doing yoga, having massage, craniosacral, anything that introduces safe touch. Because one of the keys for resolving trauma is recognizing that it is okay to experience through your body. And sometimes that can be completely dysregulated, especially when the trauma included something physical.
So you don't seem to believe that there is a separation of mind and body. Would that be a correct statement?
Yes. So no, I mean, the brain is like literally a full realsies, like organ, like literally in here inside of your body, right? So there is no such thing as this mind-body separation. It never existed. We may think it does, but I mean, if you got, this is the reason why if you had an injury to the cervical spinal cord, so the spinal cord in your neck, there's a possibility if you hit high enough that you literally sever that connection and you lose basic functioning, right? Which is potentially lethal. So that tells us that, I mean, there is no separation between the mind and body. My body is as much of an expression of me as I am of it.
I hate to tell you this. Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. I hate to tell you this, Lena. We're already like almost out of time. We're down to a minute left. So I want to leave you with one last question. And this has been so huge. We'd love to have you back and hear more about everything that you're doing because it's so important. What do you like most about what you do?
So I think what I like most about so I might get a little bit emotional. This is why I'm pausing. I have a lot of gratitude towards being fortunate enough to just simply be present to someone's story, because it takes a tremendous amount of courage to be willing to be vulnerable and start exploring and be present to the self, right? And that takes a risk. That takes a risk of trust, to entrust someone with being present and being willing to hear what you have to say, right? And then from there, be willing to help out and figure out how to guide it, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm just a guide. I have this knowledge, I have this stuff, I can help you piece it out. But the person who is going to make their own transformation is the person in front of me, right? So that's what I value most about my job, that I get to be present to that change and to that hope.
And you are a guide because you allow your passion to drive you to make the difference in the people that you are meant to serve and make a difference. And I want to thank you for being here. And I think what a great, awesome team that we have here, because if there is any trauma, Alina can help to release that trauma. So then Stacy can recognize the intuition or the gut that's telling you where you want to go and help you build your brand around that. And then Lay, she can help coach you to go to unbelievable links and strengths through what you may think is impossible to possible. So I want to thank each of you, and thanks from Keelan as well, for being here on our show today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
And yes, this is your host, Tina Mitchell, signing off for the day. Or your host, and oh my.
That's okay, Tina. I got it. And your co-host, Keelan Harvey. Tina and Keelan.
Wow. Tina and Keelan, here we are. We are your local mortgage experts, and we are signing off for the day. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thanks for listening to our show. And we both look forward to talking with you next weekend. A little more money talk right here on 1150 AM KKNW.